Hey there, YouTube. Bobbles and I, we're chatting a little bit on the side, and this is what's been threatened. This is what has been threatened. Now we speak on it. The important tag is doing its pre-sale tonight. Now, a couple of quick qualifiers off the top. Number one, as tempting as it is, those of you who watched my live stream know my love affair, my long-standing love affair with tag. However, that's not what this is about tonight. They will be used as the example, and the goal of this, to be clear, right up front, is not to say don't use it. That's honestly not what I'm here to tell you. I'm not here to discuss that. But what I do want to discuss is one of the things that I always caution in general, and we've had this before. We don't know at the end of the day where this is going to work or not. The market will tell us. We'll find out in time if they can do everything they promise and everything they say they're going to do. Listen, if that's true and they improve that segment of the hobby and they add consistency and the technology is great and all this is awesome, that's a good thing in the long run. But there are certain cautionary things that we would be. So this isn't a red light stop. This is a slow down. Go proceed with caution and let's not necessarily be early adopters. And that's kind of the angle I want to take on this tonight.
I would agree. I actually, I can't remember how long ago it was I did it, but I done a video probably a year ago, maybe, when many of the newer companies came around, such as what was it,
HGA.
HGA.
Yeah. We know somebody who kind
Um,
of likes them.
yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but there was a period of time, and I know people hate when you say this term, but pop-up grading companies, they were coming out of the woodworks. And I actually did a video showing many of the grading companies that were new.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had, playing along in the Google realm, found a website that had showed the graveyard
Mm-hmm.
of grading companies that did not survive. So I completely agree with you. I'm not going to sit here and say one way or the other whether or not tag will be successful or unsuccessful, but I think in this day and age in the hobby, there is, and I don't want to say this in a negative way, but there are a lot of uninformed or necessarily inexperienced people,
Mm-hmm.
and they may think that the new shiny thing on the block is going to be all grand, and then you don't realize until later on after you've been burned that that was not the case. So, as he said, caution, um, and see how things go.
Absolutely. Now, so that we're all on the same page, because I know the comments section. So we're going to cut you off at the pass here. We're going to lead. We're going to lead with the obvious potential biases because that's the fairest way to have a conversation. We actually want to have a good conversation, but the only way to do it is to cover it. So Bubbles is an SGC bulk submitter. He's been on my channel also. We talked about this. And I, of course, have also been are good buddies with Brad Harlan, who is PSA Canada, who is a very large bulk submitter in Canada for PSA. So believe it or not, SGC and PSA can coexist. Despite my best efforts. Like, I keep trying to stoke the flames of Holy War. Like, they're not cooperating with me. I still have hope. Thunderdome will be built. We'll see if we can figure it out by next national. I still have dreams. The content gods demand it. But those biases are built in. And there may be something coming up shortly on the, not directly related to my channel that also pertains to that. So I want to get those out of the way. Just up front, like, look, I'm not going to claim complete lack of bias and complete objectivity because that is not possible. And one of the biases that I'm going to include is that as the whole tag thing came in, I have a personal distaste for their marketing tactics leading into the release and presale. I didn't like the way it was done. I have criticized it verbally, so in case anybody wants to pull up clips, you'll find them. Because I wasn't hiding the fact that my disdain for the way in which they've marketed. That does not mean the company can't do what they're trying to purport to do, and that's very possible. So I'm making clear they may still yet be successful, but I didn't like the way they started, and I didn't like the way they marketed these things, and I don't like the approach they've taken, and I don't really like the folks that they've chosen to partake in it. The whole thing with Hobby Palooza, like, honestly, I'm not the only one who wasn't into that kind of thing, and I remember it very well because it came not far from my participation in Hobby Palooza. The tag thing came up right around that same time during the programming, and I had to try very hard. And those of you who watched closely saw me roll my eyes when the next one came out. So I'm not going to hide it from you. You can find it; it's out there. But I want to give that up front. I'm not completely unbiased, but hopefully, the part of the discussion that we're having, hopefully, we can have a discussion that maybe you can take back with you again as a cautionary thing, not as a don't use it.
Right, and I would have to agree the same. I've always been open about, yes, I specifically use SGC. That doesn't mean Carlos has to use SGC. doesn't mean anyone else out there in the viewing realm has to use SGC. Everybody has different methods to the madness of their collecting or selling or whatever. Like, we all don't go to the same restaurants. We all don't like, we don't all don't drive the same cars. We are humans and we have choices, and it's nice to have choices out there.
Mhm,
Specifically with the tag ordeal, I caught, and I don't remember if it was the first episode or one of the first episodes.
mhm,
So I don't want to say which one specifically, but I did watch one of them and I
mhm,
made a comment on the video, and it was very, very aggressively replied to. I'll put it that way.
mhm,
Um, I'm not saying what they're planning will or won't work. It's just very skeptical to me. We've
mhm,
been down this road before with the AI slash robotic slash automated slash what have you grading. It's very questionable. But again, I'm not saying that they don't have a technology, but something that we can kind of get into a little bit if you want was, I guess they have put security measures in place with what they're going to grade.
mhm.
So it'll be interesting to see even what that like, will that attract to an audience at all? I mean, you have a very limited measure that you're saying, okay, we can only do this.
Mhm.
So I mean, I don't know. It'll be curious to see how it plays out, I guess.
Yeah, without rehashing the whole discussion, because it was very elaborate, but also it became very wordy after a while, and I kind of understood because I went and read some of the patent filings to get a little bit of the gist, and I had buddies of mine who understand that a little bit to read it. They have their own opinions on it. I will spare you all that weren't favorable, but like I said, to be in the spirit of fairness, I will spare you those. But part of the critique isn't that it's not possible for this technology to be useful and handy. It's not. It's not that it's not. Again, I'm not going to unless I test it myself. I cannot correctly and properly tell you that it's not going to work. That would be unfair. There are some hangups and some questions I would have because, and I'll use a couple of examples. Disruptors in the marketplace is a great marketing term. Now, the fun part is if you start a company, you have the benefit of all the mistakes that every other company before you has made. And this is one point I want to make that kind of to refresh our memories collectively here. Part of the reason something like an HGA even took off in the first place was because of the fancy labels and the whole custom thing. And the guy Tyler Witt, I forget the last name, but Tyler went around and did the circuit of the different podcasts and everything, and he said all the right things. When you're a new company in the space, you get the benefit of the doubt in this hobby. This is the way it works, especially if you're promising the moon and the stars. Well, HGA originally took advantage of the fact that that was a time PSA wasn't available. They weren't in the marketplace. SGC was still trying to ramp itself up, trying to get it. But the way I look at it is that depending on your opinion, we have between 3 and 4 fully viable companies. There's a tool for almost every job. You want to use PSA, fine. You're not happy with their service, you're not happy with the turnaround time, no problem. Use SGC. You don't like that one, use CSG. You don't like any of that, you can use Beckett and take your chances. The point isn't that there isn't other options available. You've actually got 4 options that have some track record. Even CSG, who's the newest to the space, and I want to use this for comparison and contrast. Their initial foray into it is we have strong financial backing. We're a company that does third party grading in these different categories anyway, so we're not new to the game entirely. And we hired 2 senior graders from an established third party grader. So to begin with, we have somebody in the room who has done this before. And this is,
Well,
go ahead.
and to many unknown, like, they have the Pokemon, sector separated with CGC, but really, what is there's not a huge difference between a Pokemon card and a sports card
Sure.
outside of maybe corners,
Yeah.
but also, like, unbeknownst to many, they were the original owners of SGC, so it's not like they're even unfamiliar with sports card grading. Anyway, they've done this before. They owned a company before. Um, and they also, I think, kind of rolled out something, heard noises, and said, "Hey, let us change this." So,
Yeah.
spot on with them. Again, as you said, you have the advantage of what others have done
Yeah.
when you're the new guy on the block, and you would think that that gives you a competitive advantage. some things I have picked up that I've noticed Tag is, I guess, using to their advantage is the whole grader notes thing. They're offering you a little bit spicy deal with free shipping. They're trying to make it attractive with this box and
It's
I
a
guess
really cool
cards.
submission box, Bobbles. It's a.
Yeah,
By the way, out of all the things I critiqued, and I made fun of a lot of it. Again, I'm emphasizing my bias on this. Like, just to understand where I'm coming from on this. I actually thought the box was kind of cool. I don't know if it's practical, but I like the idea. I thought it was kind of neat.
well, so again, and I didn't get too in depth in it. I was just on the
Sure.
site
Yeah.
browsing
Yeah.
around at it. Is this a thing where you like do your submission and then you get the you have to wait for the kit to arrive and then you have to package it in the kit and then send it back to them, or like do you order this kit and then just submit
Yeah.
whenever
So what happens is,
you're ready, or
so the way they did it is that when you go in, so I'll speak to the way it is right now, and I'll actually show it here, just as we're talking. As we're talking, I
yeah,
can actually show it, just so we're all on the same page, and I'll give a little bit of background where I can. Fortunately or unfortunately, I subjected myself to a lot of those episodes. Okay, so right now they're doing their pre-sale. So this is coming up, and at the Burbank show, they're going to be setting up. This is going to be their first thing. This is the only reason we're really talking about this because now, okay, now the wheels are in motion. And again, a lot of the caution I'm going to have for you isn't that it's a bad service per se. I don't know yet. We have to test it. We got to see how the market reacts to it. I'm also not saying it's not going to work long run. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball to say that. I can say I have critiques in how it was presented in the first place and what we've put out there, but so be it. So you've got different services. The more cards you submit, the bigger amount of cards, the better the price gets. So you're starting off at this, where 60 days is $21 a card, and I'll go through some of the bullet points in just a second, but I wanted to show you there are differences. If you say 20 cards, then the price actually drops a little bit. It drops one more dollar to $20 a card, and we're looking at the most value here. And then if you do 40 cards, it's $19 a card. So you've got this dynamic pricing depending on speed and also depending on how many cards you submit. Now, with all of these things, regardless of what level you do, in it, it talks to you about what you can do, what's included in it. And in all of these, if you start the process, you get this submission kit. It's this box that can hold this amount of cards, et cetera, and it allows you to zip tie it and then close it off and ship it. So it's this kind of waterproof. So basically, what they've done is they've taken one of the challenges, in fairness, that a lot of graders have, where you, if whether I'm submitting to you, Bobbles, or whether I'm sending it in to Brad, PSA candidate, I still got to get the cards to them to start
right.
off with. And this is through a bulk submitter, but if I'm sending it directly to PSA, well, I still got to get it to them. So step one is I got to get it to them. Step two is how do I do that? So in this case, they're giving you something that also has, semi ridges included, penny sleeves included. So they're giving you some of the stuff. They're taking a loss leader to begin with to get you in the ecosystem, and they're giving you, like I said, the box looks neat. You can actually seal it and close it up and all that good stuff.
So from what I'm gathering, as long as it's used properly by the submitters, but I'm not going to get into that, but sometimes, grading cards can be confusing. So
Yeah.
they are taking, I guess you could say, a smart approach with this
Mm-hmm.
because not only is it going to help someone submit, but once you pay for that, I'm assuming you have to pay before you get that package in the mail. So then
Nope. The
you're
submission kit is free.
essentially,
The submission kit is free. They're taking a loss leader up front to try to
but
get
you
you in
have
the
to
ecosystem.
select the package, right?
You do. You will buy the package right now as it stands today, and you don't have to use it all at once. So this is key. What these are effectively grading vouchers. What you're really buying is you're buying grading vouchers at a locked-in price.
That's what I'm talking though.
Yeah.
So when you buy this kit, essentially, like I know the kit is free, but you're
Yes.
having
Yes.
to purchase the package in a
The
sense.
package. Yes.
You're locked in then because you've paid for this now
Mm-hmm.
that you're going to send them the cards.
Mm-hmm.
And what this kit also does, I would assume, is help streamline their intake process.
It should. Yeah.
Because if you're using their product and it's laid right out for you, put it in this and send it to us, then they're not having to deal with 8 pounds of packing tape and
Mm-hmm.
you know individual card savers in each individual sleeve, or there's many things, and people are packaged their cards different ways, but if this is streamlining it, that what I would think would
Mm-hmm.
help their intake
Oh,
process a
for sure.
bit. So
Yeah.
even though it's free and they're taking a hit on the cost there, it probably helps them in function on the processing side of things. So
I would agree. Yeah, for sure. And look, Bobbles, you haven't lived, And I can say there are stories, and down the road I'll get a chance to kind of share some of those stories with Brad and with some of the folks. You haven't lived until you received a submission as a bulk submitter in a cereal box. You haven't lived.
So I can't speak on it,
Hmm.
because my wife actually she really loves she helps me a tremendous amount
Hmm.
with the submissions,
Of course.
and she loves getting the packages in, and she likes to open the packages,
Hmm.
and she essentially does the processing side of it.
Hmm.
She tries her best to keep the cards a secret from me
Hmm.
until the preview because she likes me to be surprised what's in the order. Sometimes she does have to ask a question about a card, but I have to give her credit. She's pretty good at researching the cards and making sure everything is um, documented appropriately. Um, but if there's something she doesn't know, she will reach out and ask. So,
Oh, absolutely. No, but what I mean literally a cereal box. The cards
oh,
themselves can
I
be
yeah,
whatever. Like
it
it's
doesn't
literally,
surprise me.
yeah, it's like use the cap. I would love to see a Captain Crunch box. It's like, guys, so what is inside? 52 Mantle, 54 Aaron. Like Captain Crunch box, guys? Really, Captain Crunch? We slap a label on top. So to your point, I believe, like I said, I'm gonna intertwine between a little bit of fun poking at some of this stuff, but I do understand it from a processing perspective. I could totally see that being a streamlined thing. It is a cool value add. I think the box is actually not a terrible idea. Having prepaid vouchers that already have a locked in price that is still good, like they honor the price going forward, that's a neat thing. Again, I'm not saying no. I'm not saying all these ideas are bad. But my point here, and this is kind of one of the cautions that I would give with a new player in the space. At the beginning, as a new player in the space, you probably should promise the moon and the stars. Like that's part of the deal here. You may never get a better package than you're going to get at the introductory offer. So right now everything is included. It's straightforward, it's streamlined. Obviously, there's multiple versions. I showed you as I clicked through it, the
Mhm.
price kept changing. It's basically 9 sets of pricing right now.
The pricing actually is a bit concerning to me because like when you went from 10 to 20,
Mhm.
it took a dollar decrease, but then if I send 20 more, I only get another dollar
Yep.
decrease on it
Mhm.
instead of getting $2 at that point.
Mhm.
And then the difference in 14 days and 60 days, I think it was, that didn't seem like it was enough. Like to me, if I was going to give them a try, I would just pay for the 14 days, really. I mean, because it wasn't that much difference in price. But yeah, I mean, there's several things that we can talk about here. I don't know what your next point of
Sure.
topic is, but there's one that I do want to discuss,
Of course.
and
Yeah,
that would be the
absolutely.
scale. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. We'll get to that in a second. So, one more thing I want to touch on this piece here is just pertaining to the initial promises thing. Because the company's new out of the blocks, it makes a ton of sense for them to promise it. One of the critiques that I had, and it wasn't a bad thing about Tag per se, it was just like, but the way it was presented, again, it's the marketing thing that really kind of irked me and rubbed me the wrong way, is that they talked about, we'll get to the scale here in a second, but they talked about specifically like the report and the information you can get, which by the way is not a bad thing. More information is good in a lot of circumstances. Sometimes it can be overkill. And I've already seen some adjustments and some tweaks because originally we had 1,000 point subgrades on there. And I noticed, and I'll show it in a minute, the slab has been slightly modified in design. Suddenly the other subgrades have disappeared and it's just the one number and the big number. So we'll touch on that here in a minute. So I've seen changes from the mock-ups and the initial display versus the one that looks like they're going to roll with to begin with, which is fine. And again, they probably took feedback and they considered that. But what happens is that what they offer is this grading report effectively, which in principle sounds like a cool enough idea. Companies like Rare Grading and stuff already do that. Now it might not be as this detailed thing, but again, Rare Grading is one that's out there. But it's like it's this third or fourth tier grader, really cool looking slab. So again, stop me if this sounds familiar. Cool looking slab. They offer a grading report that has detailed pictures and stuff on it, and a bunch of technology related things where you can look it up on an app and all these kinds of things. Stop me if this sounds familiar.
well, look at the other one, and I'm not familiar with all of them now. There is still a tremendous amount of grading companies out there,
For sure.
and that's basically, I know the point you're trying to get to is there's just a lot.
Mhm.
Don't buy into the nonsense without knowing how well this is going to be. Folks, for the most part, outside of collecting cards, the other option for grading cards is to increase value. And many of these companies, you're going to spend money to get a holder that's actually not going to add anything to your card. Like that's the sad, you know, realistic nature to the space, right? So I can think of another company, as you mentioned, with the Rare or whatever, where they have the grading report,
Yep.
TGT. You
Yeah, that's
know,
right. That's another one.
Retro
Yep.
Hoops and stuff was talking about them,
Mhm.
and that was one of their little things.
Mhm.
Now, as someone with SGC, it's been asked about with Peter. Can you provide graders notes? And I don't know if some of that comes over because, and I might be wrong, but I think the comic world you can get free graders notes, but
I think there's some scenarios we get some of that. Yeah.
a comic book is multiple elements in one item. You know, multiple pages
Mhm.
and the spine and corner, all of that, right? A trading card is front and back with,
Mhm.
you know, it's very simple at the end of the day.
Mhm.
So I I wonder if it's just folks try to complicate things sometimes to I mean,
So
I
there's
don't
actually
know.
a discussion. I like the discussion that you're having because it plays into both the scale, which we can talk about. We can actually tie these two together because this plays into it a little bit. So my big critique with this whole thing wasn't that it's a bad idea per se, but we'll talk about that because your point is actually a really great one and plays into it. It's not that it's my point is that it's been done. My point is that as a new player in the space, you have the luxury of being able to almost have a shopping list full of wouldn't it be cool if we, and because
Mhm.
you're new and you don't already have all this other stuff going on, you don't have this baggage and all these things you have to modify. If Peter and SGC wanted to change the holder right now, they could do it. But they got to figure out how to redo the molds, how to redo the inserts. Oh, what if somebody likes the new holder better and they want to sub it out? What's our process going to be? All kinds of stuff. CSG had this, and all they did was change the label.
Yep.
Technically, the actual slab is exactly the same. The only thing they did was swap out the label. It's a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, in my opinion. I like the label, but I like the clarity of the slab. So from a PC standpoint, I like what they have to offer. I think that's great. Something like rare grading, I use it as an example because it's doing some of these tech elements. But the question that you would have, and rare grading's actually been out, I think, for over a year already. Now, they haven't really hit much in the way of market saturation. I've found videos unboxing. They even did the thing with the little wax pack kind of thing, but the little foil pack thing, which is
Mhm.
really cool for like reveals. You get to open it up and find out what the card is inside. It's cool for YouTube and stuff like that. They do that. That's part of their service. That's part of the thing. And the slab looks cool. Like from a PC perspective, it looks nice the way it is. It might be overkill, but it looks cool.
It's more novelty.
Sure.
It's more novelty than I don't know the word I want to use for it, but yeah, like you said, with the little packing and the content side of it and everything, the label. Personally, I'm probably in the minority, or maybe somewhere in the minority. I don't care for the custom label. Like I literally talk about how many different company slabs that I own. I own only one HGA slab. I personally don't care for their slab,
Mhm.
and it's almost the opposite to me when CSG had the green label and everybody was like, "Oh, it looks ugly in photos, but when you have it in hand, it's not that terrible." To me, HGA was the opposite. It looked okay in photos, but then when you got it in hand, it was ugly. Like I
Mhm.
just didn't care for the slab or the label. I know Tag doesn't seem to be going with the little colorful labels and all of that stuff, but some of the other aspects, you're exactly right. They're taking what other companies have played around with, and I guess in a sense they're trying to say they're going to do it better or something. I don't know.
Yeah, which is not a terrible. The point that I'm making with this is it's not a terrible tactic because you can be like, well, you guys like this, well, we're gonna give you that. You guys like that, we're gonna give you that, and we're gonna give you one of those too, and you get a pony, and you get a pony, and you get a pony.
Right.
Well, of course, when you're starting, you may as well offer it. You get to be Oprah. You get to offer everything, and the pricing isn't like so out of whack. It still feels like it's in the ballpark, but kind of here's the thing. The reason why I use that rare example is that, so technically, what's wrong with rare? You may like the holder, you may not like the holder. You may like the little foil thing, you may not like the whole thing. But they're not charging you extra for it. It's not too cheap, but let's say it was more competitive. So what would be the problem with rare? Here would be my question. You've got the little grading report and everything. That's cool. That's actually neat. I got no moral opposition to this. Okay, cool. Who's doing the grading? Like, do
It
they know what they're doing? Like, I don't know the answer to that question. So
That's the
go ahead.
argument Yeah, that's spot on the argument that I've had even with automated grading
Mhm,
because and I this was something I brought up about HGA when they were saying it was, AI or whatever.
mhm.
I come from a background of manufacturing, CNC machinery and all of that stuff, right? It's basically automated manufacturing. But those machines are programmed by humans. And the same thing would be
That's right.
done with automated grading. You can have a human or you can have a computer potentially give or assign a grade to a card, but that all still has to be dedicated and programmed by a human opinion.
Hmm.
Now, there's two things that it can lead to if done properly. So I'm not going to poo poo on it 100%.
Hmm.
But if done properly and you have a grader who has experience or sets a scale based off of industry standards, so to speak, it can lead to faster, processing
Processing.
of the
Yep.
grading, and it can lead to consistent
Yes.
aspects to the grading.
Yes. Hmm.
Outside of that, it's still a human that has to tell this machine what to do.
Hmm. Yeah.
I mean,
You're hitting on the exact point that I wanted to touch on. So perfect. Thank you. The reason why I wanted to emphasize that exact point that you just made is that yes, a human has to program it. So the question is A, does the human know enough to pick up? But B, and now we're going to roll into the scale thing. The reason why it's tricky is because with 1,000 point scale, you can get into super minutia.
hmm
Assuming the program, so I'm going to begin with the premise and with the assumption that the technology will do exactly what they said it will do. The optical imaging that they've got on there is advanced enough that it will pick up all these little nuances and pick up in problems on the surface and all the challenges that have existed in the past. From a centering standpoint, I could totally see optical imaging being really good at, centering. There's no doubt to me that if you know what a properly centered card is, you can compare one to one and be able to get it down to the micron. Like you could really
hmm
go tight and be bang on. If this is 50-50 centering, it's 50-50 centering. Bang on. And I have no doubt it can handle that. But when it comes down to it, and these little micro scratches and all kinds, because that's what the technology was offering. We can pick up a micro scratches. But they also said, well, if it's really, really minor, imperceptible to the human eye, it'll acknowledge it, but it won't impact the grading as much or at all, which is great. But here's where we come into a problem. And this is why it comes back to the human element, to your point. So certain scratches obviously should affect the grade. The severity, a heavier scratch is going to be more pertinent than the lightest little thin scratch, and there is a nuance difference. Okay, cool. You, the human, are programming it. We know we're deducting points. How many points is the micro scratch versus the slightly heavier scratch versus the full fledged, like, losing paper?
Well, and here's something else that I've questioned, and you'll probably understand what I'm getting at here. So I noticed on their thing that they're saying, just 2000 to present, and they're saying no die cuts, and they have specific nuances that they're excluding that they're capable of doing. But what about like, and I know you watch those back pages, he loves his etching, right? So
I've
you
heard that.
have
That's a
Prism.
rumor. That's a rumor, but I have heard that. Yes.
So how in depth or magnified is this camera, so to speak, that it's going to be able to determine the difference in the etching of the card versus a scratch on the coating of the surface? And then to your point, the depth of the scratch. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I watched a small snippet of the guy doing the tour, and he's like, well, this machine will be able to tell if it's a red or a green refractor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, that's a serious robot then.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like, there's other details of it that is just it's very questionable because, to my knowledge, regular standard human grading, the companies use like 10x. People think that they're using like this NASA telescope to magnify and look at each, individual segment of the card. They're using 10x magnification,
Mm-hmm.
and even that sometimes shows stuff that you're never going to see with the human eye.
Yeah.
So really, how deep are they getting to be able to determine, oh, well, that's etching in the card versus, well, that's a very, very, very tiny scratch? Because that would have to be broken down to simply the surface of the card versus the etching that could potentially give an illusion of a scratch.
Yeah. So without pretending that I understand the technology fully, I have read the patent filing and I have more slightly better than surface understanding of it, but without overly simplifying either, because obviously they would argue, well, oh, you just don't understand the technology. Look, I'm not going to try to explain your technology. Chill out, tech folks, calm down. I'm not going to try to pretend that I understand all the nuances of your tech, but the key to the whole thing comes down to their ability to devise either artificially or through an example what the idealized version of that type of card is. And that is the data that then is used. So if you have a card that has this etching and the system is able to basically download what this etching entails, it has a better shot at being able to determine how much reflection should happen. You know, if there is a little bit of a surface to it, it basically, you have to have a template to start off with, which is then, so your 1,000 point scale is effectively perfection is 1,000. This is the idealized version of this. Now we start deducting points. And the reason why I said, one second, the reason why I said that is so critical, that human element, is okay, but we're going to deduct points. But how many points are you going to deduct for different types of issues? Because you're the one who has to make that decision. The computer will comply with the programming. And if you need to edit it down the road, you can. This is one thing I don't like about programming, because what if the standards change? Now you have the inconsistency from the consistent machine because you had to change it because actually it was wrong.
And something else that goes to right back into what I've always questioned with HGA and the human element of needing a human to program. You have 22 years of cards that they have set themselves into saying that they will grade 2000 to present. So 22 years of cards.
Yeah. While you're doing that, I will show it on the screen
An
because I can
enormous
zoom in with this.
amount in those 22 years of products that have been released and everything else.
Yep.
To what you just stated, what you just stated, with the human element into program, you have to start and base at the perfect 1000 scale. So that means the question remains,
Mm.
how are you teaching that system every product from 2000 to present on what that 1000 perfect card actually is? And then allowing the scale to go down. And furthermore, on the scale, we've talked about they've had years to learn of what other companies want, right? I am an SGC bulk submitter. Let's not forget, SGC had a 100-point scale that was hated on.
Mm-hmm. And they
Now
didn't
they're
use all
going 10
100
times
points.
more.
And they didn't use all 100 points. Because in
Right,
practice,
exactly.
because in practice at the time, you could have tried it. And I always use the analogy with the coin grading market. You know, there's a 70 point scale there. In practice, you don't use all 70 points. Nowadays, you use quite a bit more, because now from 60 to 70, those are all the mint state grades. I know for some card folks, I might be getting the weeds, but just stick with me on this. They have a 70 point scale, and they do use quite a number of them, but they do skip some numbers. What's the difference between a 45 and a 46? You're not going to do that.
Well,
Not realistically.
it's almost like being in school. You have a 100-point scale, but what is it? 90 to 100 is an A.
Mm.
It's a similar thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what is there going to be on 1,000 point? Is it going to be 950 to 1,000? Is going to be gem mint?
So the answer to that is yes. I don't have the chart with
Okay.
me anymore, but I was able at one point during one of the lives, I was able to pull up a chart, and there is difference depending on where that 1,000 point falls. That's how you determine the 1 to 10 grade. That's how you're going to determine it. Determine it.
So essentially, it's going to be like you're in school, and I'm going to guess like 60 or 600, so to speak, and below will be your F
Mhm.
or your poor or what have you. It just seems like an awful lot to. I don't want to use the word cute, but
Mhm.
to come out with something new and undiscovered and offer all of these promises to folks, and they go absolutely remarkably smooth. Like, as you pointed out, who determines what this micro scratch, like what deduction is that? And
Yeah.
then you know, we joked around with it before we got on, but like what who determines the pricing difference between a 982 and a 971?
But the thing is,
Like
that's relevant. So like I try to balance the two bubbles. I try to poke some fun and have some fun in it. Again, I have my issues with the way they marketed it. I led with that, but forgetting all that, I'm trying now. I'm putting my consumer hat on. I'm thinking as a consumer. Okay, fine. You got it at a card show. You got your little tag card on there. Fine. Buy the card, not the grade, right? Okay, fine. Let's do it. So I'm looking at this thing as a consumer, and you're looking at it as a dealer. We're talking to each other. We're gonna have a conversation. We're looking at it. It is a tag 10. Awesome. It's a 974, and right beside it, you got the identical card, but this one is a 981. In theory, I should want the 981. It is the better graded card by 6 points. So, like, can I visually tell the difference? In theory, you should charge me more for the 981. That would make sense. Okay, and the good news is I've got a little QR code. I can scan it and see the grading report and try to get a sense of what the difference. So, are you and I going to sit there with our phones, looking at it and go, "Well, the corner on this one, I want to buy one of these two from you." And we're gonna do two different prices. So the corner on this one is like this at this magnification, and the corner on this one, but the edging on this one has this micro scratch over here, and it tells you this information, which is wonderful. I'm not against more information. I'm not morally opposed here. But are you interested in having that conversation? This already sounds miserable to me. This sounds like work.
so I mean if we're having fun and being theoretical here,
Yeah.
I think the best case scenario is to take that 981 and have Mike Baker put his sticker on it after he's scanned the QR code
Of course.
and determined of whether or not the markings on that little grading report guarantee or condone the 981 score,
Mm-hmm.
and then that would you know then you would get whatever color he chooses to put on it, and then we could compare the stickers between the 981 and the 974, I believe was the other one I had in my
Mm-hmm.
display case. And you know, it would come down to that, and I guess was it the corners that conducted the difference in grading? Was it the centering?
Mm-hmm.
Is why one was the 981, the other was the 974. At the end of the day, it comes down to eye appeal. When you get into that stage of pricing difference between cards, we know this. We both enjoy vintage cards.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to come down to, do I see something on the 981 that I don't see on the 974? Is there something that is physically different about the two cards to make me say, yeah, I'm going to pay more for this one?
I'm with you.
Or
But I think though the key though is when the reason I use those two numbers and I kept them so close together is that while the system, again, I'm beginning this entire discussion under the premise the system does exactly what they promise. I'm even beginning with the premise that it's been programmed properly. They developed the right 1,000 point idealized version of this to use as the baseline. They figured out the etching. We're good. This machine will pick it up. Great.
is
Now
it
that's such a small
singular
difference.
points? Is
Go
it
ahead,
going to
sorry.
be a singular 1,000 point scale?
It is originally, now I don't know if they've modified this, but originally it was 4,000 point subgrades. So centering's got 1,000 point, edges have 1,000 points, corners have 1,000 points, and surface has 1,000 points. And then there's another 1,000 point that goes right beside the big number. So there's 5,000 point subgrades, and then the big number out of 10.
Did Now, I did hear some of the story about the guy who thought brainstormed this and was like one of the instrumental people. And I can agree with some of his frustrations to a point of, I guess he cracked some cards out, sent them to one company and cracked them. I've witnessed the same thing where grading is different across the board. I
Yep.
get that,
Yep.
okay? But that is a little too far.
So
And
so here it is, just for visual reference. So like I said,
yeah,
this has been cleaned up. The original version had four subgrades across the bottom. Now it's the one with the QR code. So this is a 972, and then
I
that's a Gem Mint 10.
okay, so that card was a reason that I made the comment that I was speaking on that was negatively or very aggressively replied to was because if I remember correctly, the subgrades that were on it, and I'm, obviously I see a ton of cards. Uh, I questioned the centering standard for this Mike Trout card because it is slightly off centered, and it was very aggressively replied to. But I think this is just a bit too much. I mean, let's think about this for a second, okay? And we're gonna go into PSA mode. There's no, I'm not going to sit here even as a SGC bulk submitter and argue or debate. PSA sells for more. They have higher demand. The hobby accepts them
Mhm.
and has them as a clear number one, right?
Yep.
They don't even have the in-depth scale that any of the other grading companies have. They have no 9.5, and they very rarely use the 8.5, 7.5, 6.5 on down. The only reason the card gets that is if they feel the eye appeal condones the half point. That's when the eye appeal comes into play.
Yep.
If the card meets the 8 standards, but they feel the eye appeal is stronger than an 8, they'll toss that 0.5 on there. So the company that everyone accepts and sets up as number one has the most basic scale out of any company out there. And then these guys are going to just try to complicate things by taking a 10-point scale and then maximizing it into 1,000 points. I just don't see the need in it.
So like I said, and I'm trying to give this the fairest treatment that I can. With my limited abilities, with the bias that I have built in. I'm trying to give this but I'm also trying to be practical from the consumer perspective. The idea that, well, you don't have to use the grading report, you're 100% right. And you're not charging me extra for the grading report. So I'm not complaining about that. I think that's perfectly fair. But I'm trying to imagine the conversation. That's why I gave that silly scenario. But it's not silly because in practice, if I send multiple of the same card, theoretically, unless there's some miracle of God, most likely there will be a slight variance. Even if the cards are pretty damn close, there should be a little bit of variance. Realistically, there should be a little bit. So how do I then, as either a buyer or a seller, reconcile with the fact that technically this is the better card, but visually that gap, if that number gap is that tight, myself to my eyes, I can't see the difference. But technically, the higher number should be worth more. So as a dealer, you would price it more, but how?
You know what? I'm going to go on record right now, and I will say this. I I completely get why the guy, he has this in-depth, immaculate, crazy thought process, right? But what happens and what will he claim? Because he's opening a can of worms with being too technical. Like this is getting too technical. In my eyes, this is too technical.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if a consumer plays the same game he plays and cracks out the tag card, sends it back in, and can show that there's a variance in that maybe they all became 10s, like maybe they all were 10s, so they hit that 10-point scale, but the 1,000-point scale showed a variance.
Now
And then they took it.
they do claim that their technology will fingerprint it so tight in tolerance. They claim they will catch that you submitted the same card.
Uh, hmm.
That's a claim. That has been the statement that they would not
If
take
they
the card
do that,
submitted.
I will be impressed. If they
Yes,
do that, I will be impressed.
but that's
I
what.
mean, PSA says the same thing, but we have seen like they claim the same thing with Gentleman, but look at some of the stuff that's been through.
I get you.
Recent stuff.
I'm only stating what has been my point to a lot of this has been until we've tested you. To your point, someone is going to do this. Someone is going to put it
Yeah.
to the test. I guarantee it, and it would make sense to do so. So maybe, and I still have one or two things we can talk about, but let me just iterate my point here right now, and then I'll come back to it again at the end, just so we're all on the same page. I'm going to repeat. I'm not going to tell anybody not to use this if they really want to. If you are curious and you have your heart set on it, Godspeed. Have a good time. Let us know how it turns out. I would love to see the reveal videos. I'm going to be interested. I'm going to be curious. But kind of leading into the point, and I'm trying to figure out, I might modify the title a little bit since the discussion has covered a lot of ground and I want to make sure it's appropriate to what we're doing here. But what I want to say is, as an observer, you're not required to be the guinea pig. At this stage,
Right.
I would adopt a very much a wait and see approach. Even if this ends up being the future, that does not mean you need to be on the first wave. Because there may need to be some adjustment. There may be some feedback. There may be some hiccups. You have right now the advantage of being able to sit back and literally, like, you know what? Y'all want to try it? You try it. I will watch from a safe distance back here, and let's see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, again, it could be the best thing since grading existed. We don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's opening up a very intriguing can of worms. And I think to your point earlier when you said the approach to the way they went about rolling it out and everything, again, just my little, you know, tidbit of experience with it. It was a tad bit arrogant, tad bit extensive. It was almost like they had to sell you on to what they were like what they're trying to do. You
Mm-hmm.
know, if it's that great, the product should sell itself. Personally, I mean, if it's this if it's this amazing that it has this 1,000 point down to the digit and it can catch it every single time consistently, then it should sell itself. Like they should have been like, here, we have the next future wave in grading. Nothing can beat what we do. And hell, at that rate, offer some free submissions out there to an early adopter program and let people make their own decision. But
Mm-hmm.
instead they chose an influencer, so to speak, to advertise their product with. And again, I felt it was very defensive and
Mm-hmm.
aggressive on way they replied to comments.
Right.
But if it's in fact, I will. I'm curious now. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I learned some more stuff about it this evening. I'm with you. Somebody's got to use it. Somebody's got to be the guinea pig, but
Mm-hmm.
not everybody needs to be.
Yeah.
And I
My
hope,
caution is not telling everybody to run away. That's why I said not, this isn't a red light.
yeah,
I'm simply saying like an amber light. Hey, let's just proceed carefully and look. If you want to try it, buy the smallest possible package. Then like
exactly.
minimize your exposure. And I have one more thought here. Again, I'm going to give Tag every benefit, but I still have one question that I want to touch on. But please continue.
Well, and just as you said, buy the smallest package. So we haven't even touched on they're going to be set up at Burbank.
Yep.
I am fairly certain that show is going to get a great attendance. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Rob does a great job with Burbank. He does a great job with marketing. It's in California. People on the West Coast have been wanting a nice large show. It's got a corporate presence there. Why didn't they offer like bring us 2 cards? You know, for a limited time, the first day and the first couple hours, we will offer, you know, a free take back home grading submission on under the 60-day circumstances to let you try us out. Why
Mm-hmm.
didn't they offer that? You know, an opening act of kindness to say, "Hey, we are here. We believe in what we're doing. Give us a chance." Because it does just seem to be a bit too much. Some of this, like 10 years in the making. Okay, well, you know, PSA and SGC has been around for, you know, over 20 years. What's your point? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, you're basing that this is going to be so extravagant because you did some tests with your opinion of cracking cards out and sending them to the various grading companies and what they got as a grade, right? And now you're saying that your computer machine is going to be down to the digit consistent. It's a lot to absorb and believe in. Um, I'll be an audience member. I want to see it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see it. So
We'll fire up our popcorn. But
yeah,
the last kind of scenario that I want to put out there is one that we kind of played a moment ago. But let me take it one step further, just to get us to the the thought process here. So let's say it works out. Let's say they were able to sell out of those pre-sale packages and everything. Great success. You get the cards out there, they're good. I'm still looking at the practical. So I'm giving you all of this. I'm giving you a great start out of the blocks and all this great stuff. I'm trying to imagine that conversation, like I talked about a couple of times tonight. I'm trying to imagine that conversation at the show or trade night. I'm trying to imagine how we have this discussion, trying to establish where you fall in the pecking order. Look, it's one thing to throw it up on eBay and on an auction, and let's find out where the market bears on it. Cool. But as a buyer, I don't know how to comp it. Yeah, it's a 10. Okay, cool. But then we got that other, we got all this extra info so I can get down to the nitty gritty, and I'd be like, again, if you're talking about really small, like slivers of difference, the eye appeal could be virtually identical. So it's like, okay, so cool. You got a nice looking option A and a nice looking option B. And you know that, like, you can see right on the label, this one is the better one. But visually, like, yeah, these both look good to me. Okay, so do I take the cheaper one, quote unquote, or do I go for the higher one because it has the slightly higher technical? Maybe there's a micro scratch I can't see that the
Well, let
system
me
picked up.
let's pretend this way. So in your initial scenario, we had what was it, a 981 and a 974, right?
Yeah, something close enough that's still a 10. Yeah.
Okay, let's go ahead and assume, and we're doing this for fun purposes
Mm-hmm.
and discussion purposes. But the hobby is pretty much adapted. Your baseline market value is going to be a PSA 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the cards fall from there. Okay?
Yeah.
So let's say Tag comes in and they have a strong support system, and I'm going to give them a benefit of the doubt, and they're going to sell at 70% of PSA 10 values, right?
Sure.
On a gem mint copy, because that's what we have to base it on.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say that 70% fall off of the PSA 10 value puts the card at, on a 1,000 scale, $1,000. Okay, and
Mm-hmm.
we're assuming the 1,000, a perfect 1,000 is 70% of what the SG or what the PSA 10 would be. So that puts it at $1,000. Is $7 going to change your mind if we roll on the point at point per dollar scale, because we're at 1,000? Every decreasing point, we're going to say, all right, it's $1 less. Does the $7 make that much difference to you?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I agree with you. But where I think though it gets interesting, and that's why I presented the scenario this way, is if I've got two right beside each other, where the
Right.
point is the $7. But the thing is, the dealer. What's the point of the dealer making it a $7 spread? You're not going to make it a
Right,
$7
exactly.
spread. You would make it bigger.
Because, well, and the other side to it is, to me as a dealer, it would turn me off. Because, all right, at this moment, I'm looking at it, well, I have two gem mint cards, right?
Yeah.
Technically, they both have a 10 gem mint on it. But now I'm going to have to taggle over a $7 price difference or what. And I was just using that as a fun term
Yeah.
because if it was $1,000 card, realistically, the mine's going to be like every point down
My
is
my
$1
my point is that suddenly you took what was a simple transaction where it said Gem
and
Mint 10 on
complicated
it,
it.
and you just turned it into a discussion.
Right. Yep.
We agree it's a 10. We can see it says 10 right on the side of the damn box. But the 10 comp on eBay is a 981 and you have a 974. So I'm not going to give you, 981 money for a 974. I know it says 10 on the other number, but it's not the same.
Right. You're taking that simplistic 10-point scale, and you're breaking it down into. It's kind of like I talked about with the 90s inserts, and they used to be serial numbered to 10,000. And
Mm-hmm.
today they're taking and fractionalizing them and just making them different colors and patterns and everything. But in a sense, they're almost back to that 10,000 margin because of the same image, just different colors and everything. You're doing this essentially the same thing. You're fractionalizing a 10-point scale into 1,000 points and literally just making it more complicated.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like you said, if you had two in the case that had a difference in even a small margin, 7, 10, 12 points, whatever, but they both said gem mint 10 on it, the buyer, the consumer, is going to want to haggle the dealer on price for the lower scale on the 1,000 point. The dealer is going to want to hold firm. They're both gem mint 10s.
And they're
So
both,
you're
by the way, within their right in doing what makes sense for them. Like, why would
exactly
the dealer want to play around with that little subgrade? And the buyer is like, you're damn right. I'm going to use every advantage. You just gave me another tool in my toolbox to try to beat you down on this thing.
right. And to further talk about complicating things, I can sit and pre-screen my cards to send in for grading right now. And I can pretty much know, pretty standard within a half a point of what my card's going to get on a 10-point scale that where SGC has 9.5 and everything. I'm not going to sit here and be ballsy enough to send one in and say it's going to be a pristine, right? So I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh yeah, let me pre-screen your card and oh well, this is a 964. No, you can't do that. It's humanly impossible. You're taking it to an element and an extreme that is only that's why I said earlier, they're making it too complicated. I don't see the use case scenario of where this is necessary in the sports card market space. I just don't. Sure, if you want to give grading report, fine. The
Mhm.
1,000-point scale, I think that's useless. You know, maybe the AI technology is great. Maybe the consistency would be great. I think they're setting themselves up with that scale because, again, if you send that card in and it starts at a 981 and it goes down to a 978, someone's going to start questioning your robot. Oh, well, it's inconsistent. You just dropped my card 3 points, right? Instead of just sending it in and it's a gem 10, sending it back and it's a gem 10, sending it back and it's a gem 10, you might have a difference of 9 points across three different measures that
Mhm.
fluctuate up and down on a 1,000-point scale. You're complicating things for yourself and for the consumers on both sides of the table.
No, I think it's completely fair. So I think the bottom line is, like I said, I'll stand by my original statement at the beginning. This is not a tag hate fest. Because if I
No,
wanted to do one, Lord knows I could. Lord knows I could, but I'm not going to, and that wasn't the point here. However, it is a conversation between two incredibly biased people. We look forward to your correspondence. Like again,
that's
we lead
fair.
into it. Like, and
I'm
honestly, we lead into
honestly
it.
interested. I hope if folks do use them, or especially if they do get cards graded and
Tell us
they
about it.
crack them out,
I'm
yeah,
curious.
let us know because I am honestly curious. To me personally, I feel it's complicating things, but I would love to see how consistent, how accurate, all of that. Like, hell, pre-screen your cards and see if you can get them down to the digit on what they're going to get. I am very curious. So,
I think there's some good. I think there's some good YouTube content forthcoming here. I think the potential is there for some good YouTube, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure I'm not going to pay for it, but I am looking forward to it, and I am curious. Now, before we go, there's one more thing I wanted to do. I wanted to. We didn't talk about this beforehand, but I do want to give it a little shout out because you and Refractor Jones have started up a little podcast. So I want to give
yes,
you
sir.
a little plug here. So right now the Card Chatter. So it's yourself and Refractor Jones. Right now you got the first episode. You can find a little bit about their background, a little bit about them. I know that you and Refractor are going to have ideas. I think you've already started
Yep.
working on some episodes that you might already be in the can. What's the idea? What's the plan here, conversationally? What do you guys want to do here?
So basically, me Refractor has been around, supported my channel, been in the Facebook group for a long time. He is just a bit background on him. He's been in the hobby for 40 years. He
Mm-hmm.
used to work for Beckett as a pricing analyst in the basketball card market. He has over he was just at the house at the National.
Mm-hmm.
He goes to card shows and just buys every refractor that a dealer has if he can get them at the right price. Doesn't even matter who it is. If it's at the right price, the man loves cards.
Mm-hmm.
And he's very familiar with Dr. Beckett. He knows, Ken Golden, many people in this hobby he's very familiar with. He also has a background in Major League Baseball. He worked in, I think he was a clubhouse manager for the San Diego Padres
Mm-hmm.
back when Tony Gwynn was there. The man just has a wealth of knowledge, and he's someone that I have been fortunate enough. I don't claim to know everything. I do know a lot about the hobby, but I don't know everything. And he's someone that I've always been able to fall back on if I have a question about something that I feel he might know, have some information on.
Mm-hmm.
He knows some of the you know, backstories, like with the Fleer bankruptcy and stuff that were walked out the back door.
Mm-hmm.
He has many different stories to tell. This is simply a podcast to someone, he's not an SGC guy. We do have differences of opinions on things, and it's just to speak about the hobby. We may have some newsy stuff on there sometimes to give our opinions and thoughts on that. But just kind of educate, you know, just entertain. That was the word that was slipping. It was right on the tip of my tongue. But we
Okay.
want to
Yeah.
entertain folks, educate, and just share stories. And if it helps somebody, great. But we hope that you enjoy it. The plan is right now is to do Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays. So there
Mhm.
will be episode 2 up tomorrow. I'm trying to put them on a schedule. I've always been bad about that on my channel, so I'm trying to do this on a schedule. We have 3 episodes currently already recorded, and yeah, he's just a great guy. He chose me, and it's awesome to hear that other folks have wanted him on to talk hobby type stuff, and he actually told me he wanted to do a podcast with me. We chose podcast because it's easier to just get on and talk
Mhm.
rather than need to be in a he's out on the road a lot buying collections, so he may not always have like a studio he could be set up in.
Mhm.
So we chose podcast style. He also, as much as he likes to talk about cardboard, he doesn't want like his full life exposed out to the interwebs. So
Sure.
I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I hope folks enjoy it. And I'm blessed to know many people in this hobby and someone like him that just the man is like an encyclopedia of knowledge. So
Beautiful, beautiful. So it is the card chatter. I'll include a link to it in the description of this video. So after you're done with our Tag Hate Fest and our horrific bias, after that, you can check out the card chatter, which probably they won't be talking about tag. Probably not.
no,
Yeah,
no.
I
Episode
kind of know.
2, just as a teaser for episode 2, we talked about whether we were long-term or short-term collectors, like
Mm.
what our plans with our collection are, and then we do get into a little bit about thoughts on potentially the future of the hobby
Mm-hmm.
and youth and compared to how when we were collecting as a kid versus what the youth of today has at their exposure on kind of just some of the differences
Mm-hmm.
of our childhood collecting versus what kids today are. So it's more about long-term or short-term collecting and the youth and future of the hobby. So
Nice, good stuff. So I did listen to the first episode. I was the first comment on the first episode.
yes
Let
sir,
no
you
one
were.
else lay claim. I
And
got
I,
this.
I'll also hopefully it gets better with time. I never really do a lot of video editing.
Mm-hmm.
He was having some connection issues where we were recording the first 3 episodes, so I've been trying to play along. Unfortunately, I've had to cut some stuff out because he gets kind of choppy. So if the audio isn't 100% clear, I apologize. But hopefully, we get better as time goes on. And I am learning to edit to try to make this the best listening experience we can. So.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. No, for sure. And like I said, so I wanted to throw some support behind it. You guys are getting going on that. The first episode was fun, so hopefully, folks, give it a chance if you want to check it out. If you don't have enough already hobby content as it is, well, there you go. There's another one. You can check it out on YouTube, and it's there. Like I said, link will be in the description to all that, and link to Bobbles and Ballcards will be there in the description as well for his YouTube channel, as well as you can connect to him on all the other ones. He's got the website going, so I'll include a bunch of that in the description just so you guys can connect straight to it. Bobbles, thank you for joining me on this horrific hate fest. This
Hey,
completely
thank
biased
you.
one-sided hate
And
fest.
no hate, just basically as you started the episode off with, just letting everybody know it's cool when a new shiny toy gets put in the toy box, but sometimes it's not as fun as you expect it when you've seen it in the commercial on TV.
Sage wisdom. These are facts. Like I said, just the underlying thing to all of this is like, look, man, proceed at your own risk. At least proceed with your eyes open. We offered several critiques and things that we have. You completely disagree with all of them. And if that's the case, well, then go at it, full speed ahead. God bless you, and, let us know about it. I would like to know. Bobbles would like to hear about it. Tell us, because I'm going to be curious, but I'm going to do the wait and see approach. I have no reason to jump into that pool because right now I have items that serve. And actually, sorry, one last thing I want to kind of throw in at the end that kind of played into our last point. As it stands today, unless you give me a very good reason to want to use you, I would need a good reason to leave the existing ecosystem. It may not be perfect, but I already know what I'm getting. It's the devil I know versus the devil I don't. And right now, you haven't given me a good reason to adopt your new devil.
And I think to that point as well, We do have options right now. We are
We do.
blessed to have the options out there. There's not just one company to use. There's many options. That's awesome as a consumer, as a collector. But the other side to it is, you know, I also want to preface, as he said, we do have bias involved here, but I want to be clear cut and make it known. We're not sitting here and saying any of the current companies that we personally feel are reliable to use. We're not saying that they're perfect.
No.
All of the companies make mistakes. They have made mistakes. So
And they
we're
will,
not
and they'll make more.
yeah, exactly. So I just want to make sure that's clear as well before anybody says, well, APSA just slapped this card or SGC screwed this up. We know they've all made mistakes. None of them are perfect. And we can probably lay money in Vegas that tag won't be perfect either. So, but
Absolutely. And hopefully, like I said, at least it gives you something to chew on. And if you are going to the Burbank show, I would love to hear about it.
feedback.
Yeah, like if you actually visit the booth, how is it? How are they doing? I would love to know because if that's the case, like my Instagram is right there. So you're more than welcome to reach out and ping me, and I would love to hear directly from the horse's mouth if somebody visits there. If you got your free kit, you did your pre-order and all that good stuff, and you're gun ho and ready to send in all of your Tom Brady contender rookies to tag.
Oh,
Good luck with
you
that.
can't. You can't. They don't
Oh,
take
that
autos.
that's true. That's true.
Yep,
So
they
maybe
don't take
Bowman Chrome.
autos.
Maybe Bowman Chrome.
That's gonna be interesting because there's never mind. I won't even say it.
I'm just saying it would be a very spicy meatball. Look, don't tell me about your
Ooh.
Zion base card that you submitted to tag. I want to hear about your Bowman Chrome Tom Brady that you decided to go with.
There is a lot of Gem Elite Bowman Chrome Refractor Brady's that have circulated around that are fakes, and oh,
I feel like, look, I wasn't joking about this. I feel like when you are a new entrant in the space, this happened with HGA. Like, it did happen.
yep, they get
So
tested.
they get tested. So some folks are going to give it a go. It's like, this card has been altered. I'm going to try you guys and see if you can catch it. And we'll
Yep.
see. We'll find out. So that's why I say, like, good luck. I'm not wishing you ill. Good luck. But at the same time, like I said, I think it'd be cool if the technology can do what's promised, if it can develop the consistency that's promised. But it's almost one of those situations where, like, I don't necessarily need you. Maybe it's a situation where I need your tech. And if one of the other companies is like, okay, I just want the tech, I don't really need you guys. It could be one of those situations, or it could be a thing where they do revolutionize the industry. It could be completely the opposite. Who knows?
And if they did, like, if something like that does happen to where it could, make it consistent, they can prove, hey, this stuff is 100% legit. I would say toss out the 1,000 point scale and have at it to where I know when I'm sending a 10 in, it's a 10. And it's not like, a random spin of the
Well,
wheel
you could
sometimes,
always keep it.
which
You could
most
always
of them
keep.
are pretty good at that,
Yeah,
but there are questions at times.
you
So,
could always keep it in the grading report. Like I'm not
yeah,
saying don't if somebody legitimately wants to look at it, we'll give them the option. Like put it in the grade because they already got rid of the subgrades on the holder. There's
right,
one more
right.
holdout. There's one more that you left on there, and I'm like, okay, let's see what happens with that one. I'd be
Yeah,
curious.
yeah. So I agree. And again, as he said, it, let us both know because I
Mhm.
am curious. Again, this wasn't, it was jokingly commented as a hate fest, but it's not a hate fest. It's just more of a yield warning sign,
Well, to
so
be
to
clear,
speak.
this video is not a hate fest. On my live streams on Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern time will probably be a hate fest. That's different. I'm trying to maintain what little objectivity I can in this video. But on the Friday lives, all bets are off.
The shenanigans must ensue.
Yeah, it's like and don't even get me started that they use Mike Trout as the example on that. I'm not even going there right now. I am not
I
even going there.
still, like, my eyes, like, I joke that my eyes are getting worse, but I'm pretty good at spotting centering. I I remember that's the reason I commented,
Mm.
and they got defensive because I believe I commented something about the centering and what the subgrade was, and I kind of jokingly said, "Well, if this is how it's going to be, this isn't going to work," or something like that.
Mm.
And the comment kind of came back pretty aggressive with, "Oh, well, I'm sure that's just like what they used as an example or something," which makes it even worse because, like, if you're using something as an example, you legit have
You
Photoshop.
could have photoshopped. Yeah, I was gonna say
Yeah,
you could
you have
Photoshop. Okay.
Photoshop to pick the best option out there, and that's
Yeah.
what you chose. So that was kind of my point. But
Bubbles,
anyway,
what you don't seem to understand. Look, I know you've been in this hobby for a minute, but what you don't know is that the 2011 Topps Update Mike Trout is actually off center by design. So that is perfect centering. The perfectly centered version is the mistake.
Well, I'm gonna have to send my 9 in because then it might be 1,000.
That might be 1,000 more.
Holy
Might
hell!
be 1,000. I'm just
Ah,
saying. I'm
man.
just saying. Just maybe you guys didn't read this right. Maybe you don't understand.
Phew.
Okay, now we're delving into hate territory, and I'm going to stop it right there. I could continue, but I'm not going to. So, thank you all. Thank you, Bobbles, for joining me. I appreciate you offering your side, your insight as well as your opinion. And then we'll continue forward with this. More videos coming up on the channel. Live streams 8 p.m. Eastern time, where it's mostly shenanigans and me making fun, with moments of lucidity where we actually talk something serious. It does happen. It does happen from time to time. To break up the monotony. We don't want it. We don't want it all the time, but sometimes. But sometimes. So, thanks very much, everybody. We'll catch you in the next one.